A beautiful morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Dawn Train this morning. I'm so excited to be here because I know a lot of people are at home. A lot of people are resting. You know, we have today is what do we call it? Midterm break, and a lot of teachers are at home. The conversation this morning is going to be related a lot to children because I know if our children don't learn today, tomorrow we'll be having a lot of problems. Today is the 21st of February 2025. And as we know, or rather say that today is the International Mother Language Day. It's been celebrated around the world. UNESCO, right from 2000, says this is important and that is why it's worthy that we celebrate it. How many of us actually speak our language? How many of us are still speaking our language? The world has as much as 7,168 languages, but how many of those languages are still in use? I have a cousin who cannot speak my dialect. So trust me, if he gets married, very soon the children will not be able to speak because daddy has nothing to teach. What if mommy cannot teach at well? What happens? Those children grow up without a language, without an identity, because there is no culture without language. So this morning I have wonderful people with me in the studio to do justice to the subject matter. I am Ubeleji Tiara, and I'm glad to have you join me. Hopefully we'll have time to take your calls, hopefully. That is if I don't get carried away. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest for you this morning. I have with me in the studio Professor Helen Sukari A. Okujago. That's the chairperson of Literacy Promotion of Nigeria, Rstv State Chapter. She's also a lecturer in the Faculty of Education, Department of Early Childhood and Primary Education. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you.
With me also here is Dr. Victoria Otonna Macaulay, the Vice Chairperson of LIPMAN, that is Literacy Promotion of Nigeria. Doctor, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
So this morning we want to talk about language. Basically, we want to talk about language. What is mother tongue? What is mother tongue?
Mother tongue is the first language.
And why is it called mother tongue when we also have a father there?
You know, there's this bond the child shares with the mother, and it's not exactly why it's called mother tongue.
I would have loved to know why we call it mother tongue and not father tongue.
No,
when there is a father in the picture as well.
Every child is being born by a mother, and the first language the child picks up is assumed to be from the mother.
Okay.
And from the immediate environment the child is being born into, which is supposed to be the child's first home.
Okay.
So ideally the mother tongue is the first language, the first sound the child expresses when he begins normal communication.
Okay, that's mother tongue.
Yes, that's
the first
mother
language
tongue
the child learns.
Yes.
Which is usually from the mother, like you explained, from because of that bond they have.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what's the relationship, Doctor, what's the relationship between mother tongue and culture?
Okay,
How has it affected you as a person?
Thank you very much. Now, buttressing what she just said, my prof just said, mother tongue is the first language a child picks up. In fact, it's the language of the immediate environment. It doesn't matter if it's your native language or a foreign language, as long as that language is within the child's environment. That's the language spoken in that family and spoken around the child. That's the mother tongue. And the child will naturally pick it up. It doesn't need to learn it. He acquires it. Now, the relationship between mother tongue and culture. Every culture, every language has in it the culture of its speakers. You cannot separate language from the culture of the people. So, the language forms your identity. The language forms your ideology. The language forms your perspective. So, any culture you find yourself in. You speak the language and you act like them. And then it is called mother tongue, just like we call our land motherland.
Okay.
You wonder why it is not fatherland, when indeed the father has actually owned the property. It is mother tongue because, like I said, it's biological. It's not acquired. It's natural. You don't learn it. You just acquire it naturally.
So
Thank
how
you.
has mother tongue, how has it shaped your identity as a
Okay.
person?
Now the language, like I said, the mother tongue of a people, the language of a people would frame their world, would shape their identity. It would checkmate the activities. Why? Like I said, the culture of the speakers of a language is always embedded in the language you speak. Take for instance, a white man, a white child. He just greets, hi Bob, and he passes. Yeah, that's their culture and it's there. But even if you're if you're a Nigerian residing abroad and you see your fellow Nigerian, maybe an Equatorian man, you won't do that. You remember who you are. So the language of a people will define you.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So we are here to actually advocate and remind us that mother tongue, actually, our language is a treasure that we should cherish. We should not, because of is it Gen Z they call it, and forget what defines us.
You know, we have a lot of people, Nigerians who were abroad, and some persons were born there, but they no longer speak their language. They barely interact. I have this family from my hometown. He has been there for over 30 years. That means all the children were born there. But one thing I always adore this man for is he speaks his language to his children and ensures that every December they visit home. Every December. According to him, they've never missed 1 year. So for the past 30 years, he ensures that his family comes home. Now, what happens to those families who are abroad and barely visit home, barely speak with grandma, barely speak with cousins who are still in Nigeria? How can we preserve our culture with such people as citizens of Nigeria?
I think that tradition is beginning to change because I know most families overseas, they speak the native language. Usually, before, the mother tongue used to be the indigenous language, the language that is commonly spoken within your immediate environment, that is spoken in your home. But recently, you find out that even in our villages, people speak English instead of the indigenous language.
Yeah.
So the mother tongue sort of has become English for the children because that's the first language they hear their parents speak.
But is that supposed to be the case?
No, growing up as a child, my mom spoke Igbo, my father spoke Okrika. And that was the basic language for communication at home. My dad will tell you when you get to school, you learn how to speak English because we do not learn our language. It's part of our culture. We are born into it. So we just begin to communicate in the native language. So automatically, the native language becomes the mother tongue. Now, for most people overseas, they found out that gradually the indigenous language is dying. It's going extinct. So they made it a point of duty to communicate in the native language at home with the children because the whole of the environment there, they speak English. And if they have to stay there for 5-10 years, by the time they come back home, they can't communicate any longer. So
Even for an adult who doesn't call home and you're not speaking
Yes.
5 years, 10 years, you can't be as fluent as someone who is over here and is still using that language. So we don't expect the children not to have that same problem. Now, how do we preserve our language? Because we know that here in the South, how many schools are teaching Ijaw language? How many schools are teaching Obolo? We have 3 major languages in Nigeria. That is Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. And in most schools, they tend to do that. In the West, they'll teach you Yoruba in school. You learn one language, and that's Yoruba. If you're in the East, you learn one language. If you're in the North, you will learn one language. That's Hausa language. How about also in the South? We have a lot of languages. Only Nigeria has as much as 515 languages.
More than that.
So, what happens? No, I'm using that number because a lot of languages have gone into extinction. And if it continues, we learn from statistics that every 2 weeks a language is lost. So in February, by next week, which is the last week of this month, we must have lost 2 languages this month. So what happens in such a situation? How do we tend to preserve our language?
Thank you. I think that's part of the reason we're here. Yeah, that's part of the reason we're marking World Mother Tongue Day. You deliberately and intentionally set up activities and policies for this reason. The government, in fact, there are different stakeholders to ensure this. The government is there to play their role, working with the legislatures, and then the teachers, the language planners, policy makers, everyone is involved. And how do we do that? For the teachers, policymakers can go as far as organizing and reformulating our curricula to embed these language policies, to bring in language subjects, and insist that certain subjects be taught in our indigenous languages from the early childhood, from what we call the nursery. From what we call the nursery, you introduce, let the children know that this language is part of their culture, part of their life, and then introduce it, use it as a language for instruction in schools, in our activities, in our social life. Introduce the language into our subjects. Let's have subjects. I know in our Pibom state, I went there for a funeral and we used a school. In one of the halls, in one of the classrooms, I saw something on the board. It was a language. They wrote, is it Anna? Something like that.
Yeah, Anna.
Yes, and they copied a note, a full note
In that
language. And I was amazed. We can adopt same all over the country. Like you said, Yoruba, Hausa, for this language policy now, there's no emphasis on any language. There's no superior language, there's no inferior language, irrespective. Yeah, so every language is important. That's why we're here. Every language is important. There's no low status language. Every language has roles it plays. As far as it can satisfy the communication needs of its speakers, then it's good to go. Use it for language of instruction, use it in the courts, use it in churches, use it in advertising, use it for drama.
Also,
yes, and then before you know it, it becomes exciting for the youth and they'll be proud.
So, Prof, before I let you go, you're an early childhood and primary education lecturer. How do you think policy makers can incorporate language into our curriculum?
We already have a national
Let
policy
me hear you,
on mother tongue. We already have a national policy on that was brought in 2022. And the essence is that, like you said, 3 major languages. No, we don't have 3 major languages again. We have all of the Nigerian languages are seen as major languages.
That's a new norm.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
and the policy is emphasizing that wherever the child is being given an opportunity to school, they should use the indigenous language to teach.
Awesome.
Now, the indigenous language could be the mother tongue, and it could also be the language of the immediate environment. So lessons are being taught better and understood faster by children if you use the mother tongue. That
All right,
is
thank you
the
so much,
indigenous
Prof.
language.
Thank you so much, Dr. Victoria. I appreciate you coming. We'll go on a very quick break now. When we return, the conversation continues. Stay tuned. welcome back to the studio. I hope you're enjoying our conversation. Today is International Mother Language Day, and we are celebrating it as Nigerians. What's the special aspect? What are you missing as a parent? Because I know all of this starts from home. If parents don't do their part, you don't expect the teacher to teach Ikwere when one major language they teach in schools these days is English language, which has become a norm. Every school takes English. How many schools take Ijo? How many schools take Obolo? How many schools learn Iche? How many schools is a question. So it's our responsibility, your responsibility as a parent to do your job. It all begins from home. Before we start incorporating it into our education system, please do your primary home assignments. That is why it is called homework. It is called homework for a purpose. Now with me in the studio, I have two beautiful, delectable, wonderful guests as well. I have Professor Ibiere Ken Madwaku with me in the studio from Lipan as well. And I have Dr. Scholastica Amadi. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you. Since we are still talking mother tongue. Now we have globalization coming into play, affecting the way we use our language. How do you think globalization has affected our language as Nigeria? How is it affecting our culture? And how has that cut across to our language as Nigerians? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You actually, thank you so much for that question. You called it globalization. What it simply means is that it's cutting across the whole world.
Sure.
That's one of the challenges. Okay, that's one of the challenges which we have as far as our indigenous languages are concerned. However, it has a negative impact on our indigenous languages. However, all we have to do is sing our song, because if we don't sing our song, the languages will die.
Sure.
English is doing it because English is actually singing the song, and unfortunately, we are helping English also to sing its song, relegating our own languages to the background. So our languages should be open. I think some of our languages are closed up. They've closed up in the sense that some parents derive pride in using it at home and not their indigenous languages, to which I wonder, your husband speaks Ikwere, your wife speaks Ikwere, and you prefer English. Honestly, I wonder why it is like that. I don't know. So globalization is, I think everyone wants to sound as if I'm sophisticated and suave simply because you use English.
And we use our culture in the process.
So that's what I think that the globalization is trying to impact, how we do our things.
Right when I was growing up, my dad is an Obolo man. My dad would always speak to you. He would tell you, cut and join, cut and join. Just tell me like that. Because that's the only way. When you make mistake, they correct you. That's the only way you can learn. I wonder why a lot of parents are reserved. You're not more Nigerian than we are. Please speak your language. Please speak your language. I know it's not very easy, because looking at the new Gen Z, my last guest mentioned Gen Z. Looking at the new Gen Z now, we know that a lot of people want to be as sophisticated as you've mentioned before. So how many ladies can speak their language? How many men can speak their languages? If we keep or continue the English culture, definitely a time will come when Nigeria becomes an English country. A time will come. Yeah, we might not be seeing it now. It might look like the in thing right now. But a time will come when we cannot enjoy ourselves, enjoy our languages as Nigerians. So, Professor Ibiere, I want to ask you. She talked about globalization. How can we use technology? How can we use technology to help promote our language?
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers. Good morning, viewers.
Good morning.
Yes. Globalization has helped to bring, has become a threat, let me put it that way, to our indigenous languages. And most of our languages have not been developed sufficiently to be used on the internet. So talking about technology, you see that most of the languages are not fully developed, too common to be used technologically in the country. So, okay, so what do we need to do? First of all, there has to be effort by different stakeholders in the education industry, government, and even from traditional institutions. There has to be concerted efforts, community-based efforts. Are we even ready and willing to promote our languages? Like my other speakers have said, we seem to be ashamed of our languages. We need linguists, like I said, community-based efforts, government efforts through policies. That is what can help us. Policies and linguists, professionals, language experts, lexicographers. We need professionals to come together to begin to, first of all, let's develop the orthographies of these languages.
Very true. So at this very moment, do we have any initiative that is promoting?
Right now, in Uniport and many other universities, they are also celebrating the Mother Language Day. It's a global thing right now, okay? And what are we doing? We're trying to see how we will develop the languages. So, in fact, right now, some people have done that with languages like Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa.
And even Efik.
Even Efik. Okay? So linguists have started doing something to ensure that our languages come up and are developed enough to be used on the internet. That is really the problem that we have. Our languages, like if you say I want to promote my language on the internet now, do we have the
receptive audience?
Okay, not just the audience. I'm talking about the facilities needed to upload the orthographies, the phonetic symbols. Okay.
How did Igbo? I don't think I want to accept that, because how did Igbo come to the global stage?
Yes.
How did Yoruba? How did Hausa? So we can begin to ask these questions and as well follow suit to ensure that our language comes to light.
That's what I'm saying. Linguists have developed their languages to that point. Working with technological experts, they have developed Igbo right now. There's a lady that we saw on a platform that developed a voice, something like the Igbo voice.
There is an Omenka app for
yes,
the Igbo
and there's an
voice.
Omenka app now where you can use Igbo on the internet. But what we're saying is that we're in River State, Calabari, Ikwere, Andoni, Izon, Ijo, Ibani. How many of those languages have become developed to that extent? So this is actually a call for the linguists in River State, for the linguists in the different linguists that speak different languages. We are calling them to rise up and begin to develop their languages, begin to look for apps that they can use to promote their languages online. Because except to do this, there is no way we can get a language developed to that point where it can come on and stand and be at par with English and other developed languages. So it's actually a call, concerted efforts by the government. Let policies be made by the people that matter. Let policies be made. Let people be trained. We need to train personnel. We need to train people technologically. We need to train people, teachers, beginning from the scrap. Let teachers be trained to learn how to teach these indigenous languages. Okay? These are the things that we do. Yes,
okay.
yes.
At this point, what policies do we have? What programs is lined up in the course of this celebration? You know, when we have when we talk about Women's Day, there is usually a program that goes on.
Yes, yes.
At this point in time, we are celebrating language, and you want more people to acquire language, tend to talk about their language, and not be shy. Because a lot of people are shy. How will my tongue? How will I, as I look so fine, I will not be speaking my native language? That's why a lot of persons tend to go for English, even if they are doing a lot of blunder with English language. So what are
Like
the
I
programs
said,
lined up
Yes.
this period?
In Uniport right now, starting I think from 9 a.m. in Uniport and all
Today?
Yes, today.
So you invite your family.
Yes. So we're inviting linguists in River State. We're inviting all stakeholders in this matter. We're inviting you to Uniport at the ASU block, ASU building, Delta Park. We're having an African languages conference where languages are going to be taught, and then you're taught how to use it. In fact, it is technology and the languages. That's what we're doing today. We're having in Ikwere, we're having in Obolo, and in somebody else is doing in English. So you're invited. ASU block, Delta Park Uniport today, 9-10 a.m. Please come and see how your languages can be used without adding one single English. And how the language can be used.
Okay.
And
We hope so.
it will now feel, let the languages come up. And at the vertical space, we're beginning to see our River State indigenous languages.
At least we'll learn how to stop doing cut and join with our languages.
Yes.
Because before you finish one sentence, English comes into play. Thank you so much, Professor Ibiri. Thank you so much, Dr. Kolastika, for coming into the studio and sharing this wonderful conversation with us. I am Ubelijit Yara. Continue watching Rstv. Good morning.